Today we officially opened the United States Embassy in Jerusalem. Congratulations.
On the 14th of May, President Donald Trump opened the American Embassy in Jerusalem, recognizing the city as the Israeli capital. A US veto blocked the adoption of a UN Security Council resolution calling on member states not to follow Washington's example.
President Trump, by recognizing history, you have made history.
On the day the embassy opened, Israeli soldiers fired tear gas and live ammunition at Palestinian protesters in the Gaza Strip. At least 60 people were killed. Why is the US recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel controversial? To answer this question, we need to go back to the start of the Arab-Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In 1917, the British Foreign Minister Lord Arthur Balfour issued a statement promising a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, then part of the Ottoman Empire. At the time, Jews made up only 3 to 5% of the population, but the statement formed the basis of a future Jewish state. In 1947, the UN General Assembly agreed on a partition plan, dividing the British Mandate of Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab state. The UN was to have directly administered Jerusalem, which is the site of some of the most sacred places for Muslims, Jews and Christians. Following the withdrawal of the British, the World Zionist Organization proclaimed the independence of Israel on the 14th of May 1948. The neighboring Arab countries, convinced that Israel was yet another Western imperialist project, decided to invade Israel soon after. At the end of the war, Jordan annexed the West Bank, while Egypt controlled Gaza. Israel occupied one-third of the territory assigned to the Palestinians in the UN partition plan, and Jerusalem was de facto divided in two. Jordan controlled the eastern part, Israel the west. 700,000 Palestinians fled or were forced to leave their homeland. The displaced people are confined into refugee camps in Gaza, East Jerusalem and in the West Bank. The 1948 exodus is called a Nakba by the Palestinians, the catastrophe. For about 2 decades, while the territorial confirmation remained unchanged, tensions increased between Israel and the Arab states until 1967, when the Six-Day War broke out. When the war ended, Israel controlled the West Bank, Gaza and the whole of Jerusalem, the Sinai and Golan Heights. Israel now occupied all the Palestinian territories. UN Resolution 242 called for the restitution of occupied territories in exchange for peace between the belligerent parties and the recognition of every state to live in peace. Although it was never implemented, the resolution constitutes the basis for all future Arab-Israeli peace negotiations.
It needs peace and stability to rebuild Egypt's economy, crippled by military spending. So when Israeli Premier Menachem Begin sent a formal invitation, Sadat accepted.
In 1977, Egyptian President Anwar al-Sadat broke ranks with the rest of the Arab world and visited Israel. He signed a peace agreement with Israel in 1979, regaining control over the Sinai. Over the following years, the Arab states' relations with Israel progressively relaxed. In 1974, the Arab League recognized the PLO, an umbrella organization representing Palestinian resistance movements led by Yasser Arafat, as the sole representative for the Palestinians. The PLO was listed as a terrorist organization by the US and Israel, but Arafat publicly repudiated violence and became convinced that only political compromises and diplomatic talks with Israel would have helped the Palestinian cause. The illegal construction of Israeli settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem made life for the Palestinians under occupation increasingly difficult. Growing discontent generated two responses: protests against the Israeli administration and the radicalization of certain Palestinian resistance movements, including Hamas. The First Intifada, or uprising, broke out in 1987. In order to contain the violence, in 1988 Arafat proclaimed the independence of the State of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital, while recognizing the right of Israel to exist in peace, accepting UN Resolution 242. But the Intifada did not stop. US pressure on Israel led to the 1991 peace conference in Madrid, followed by secret Israeli-Palestinian negotiations in Oslo. These produced the Oslo Accords, signed in 1993 in Washington. Arafat recognized the existence of Israel, while Israeli Prime Minister Rabin acknowledged the PLO as the sole representative of the Palestinians. The agreement gave the Palestinians self-governing rights in certain areas and set a time span of 5 years, during which the conditions would be determined to establish a Palestinian state. Delicate questions, such as the future of Jerusalem, were left out of the negotiations. The agreement represented the first concrete step toward a two-state solution, but the reaction of extremist factions, both in Palestine and Israel, ended all hope for further progress.
Once again, our top story this evening, the assassination today of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, gunned down at a pro-government rally tonight in Tel Aviv.
Between the 1970s and 90s, Israel pursued its policy of settlement expansion. The Palestinian response was even more violent, with Hamas leading terrorist attacks against Israeli civilians. In September 2000, Ariel Sharon, the leader of the Likud party, visited Jerusalem's contested Temple Mount, triggering the Second Intifada. This time, Palestinian resistance groups were involved, and the uprising had all the hallmarks of an armed conflict. The civilian casualties were high. Israel subsequently became focused on how to confine and control the conflict rather than resolving it. A separation barrier was built, at times cutting deep into the Green Line, set by 1949 armistice agreements, to include large Israeli settlements that were intended to diminish and contain the Palestinian presence. The barrier also encompassed East Jerusalem, which the Palestinians still claimed as their future capital. This is the situation as it stands today. President Trump says he will find a solution to the conflict.
Great proposal for the Palestinians. I think it's a very good proposal for Israel.
But the opening of the US embassy in Jerusalem has only worsened the conflicts between Palestinians and Israelis. In July 2018, the Israeli government passed a controversial bill which officially defines Israel as the national homeland of the Jewish people. The bill also affirms Jerusalem as the undivided capital of Israel and permits the development of settlements. The recent implementation of the Basic Law and the opening of the US Embassy in Jerusalem foreclosed the prospects of a two-state solution.